The town that wasn't on the map. It began with a road trip. The kind that feels ordinary at first. The kind where you're half bored, half excited, and checking the GPS more than the scenery. Michael and his girlfriend, Tara, had been driving for hours through Pennsylvania's coal country. The kind of place where the roads twisted like snakes and the hills swallowed the horizon. Their destination was her cousin's place, just across the state line, but they were already running late. The GPS signal had been cutting out on and off, bouncing between rerouting and no service. It didn't bother Michael much. He figured it was just the mountains interfering with the signal. But by the time the sun started dipping low and the woods pressed tighter on both sides of the road, Tara was frowning at the phone in her lap. "Take the next right," she said finally, pointing at the cracked green sign that leaned halfway into the ditch. The paint was so faded it looked like it hadn't been touched in years. Michael almost missed it. The road curved sharply, narrower than it had any right to be, with trees arching overhead like they were trying to close it off completely. Gravel popped beneath the tires, and the asphalt looked as though it had been poured decades ago and forgotten. "Are you sure this is right?" Michael asked, eyeing the dim glow of the GPS screen. The map had gone blank, a little blue dot floating in gray nothingness. "It says this way," Tara replied, though her voice carried hesitation. She held the phone higher, as if searching for a better signal. Maybe it's a shortcut. It didn't feel like a shortcut. It felt like they had just stepped off the map entirely. The woods pressed closer, darker, until twilight smeared the horizon with red and purple. Then, suddenly, the trees broke away, and the road spilled into a wide-open space neither of them had expected. A town. It rose before them, almost out of nowhere, houses stacked shoulder to shoulder, a main street lined with flickering street lamps, and the faint hum of neon signs glowing in the windows of shops. There was no welcome sign, no population marker, nothing to suggest they'd crossed into any known municipality. And yet, it was there, as real as any town they'd ever seen. Where the hell are we?" Tara whispered, leaning forward against her seatbelt. Michael slowed the car. The town had a strange stillness, like stepping into a photograph. A gas station sat on the corner, its sign half lit. Across from it, a diner with big glass windows showed silhouettes moving inside. "People. See? It's fine," Michael said, though he didn't believe his own words. "Maybe it's just small, not on a map." He pulled the car up to the curb, engine rumbling too loud for the silence that hung in the air. As they climbed out, a figure emerged from the diner. A tall man in suspenders with a face that was hard to make out under the yellow lamp glow. "You folks lost?" he asked, voice slow, deliberate. Tara gripped Michael's arm, and Michael tried to smile. "GPS cut out. We're trying to get back to the highway." The man tilted his head, studying them longer than necessary. His lips curled into something that might have been a smile, or maybe a warning. "You won't find any highways here," he said. "Not anymore." The man's words lingered in the air like a fog. "Not anymore." Tara shifted uncomfortably, her grip still tight on Michael's arm. For a moment, Michael considered just thanking him and driving away. But something in the man's tone rooted him to the spot. "Not anymore," Michael repeated, trying to sound casual. The man's eyes caught the glow of the street lamp. They were pale, almost milky, though his voice carried the weight of someone much younger. "Roads don't lead where they used to," he said finally. "Once you're here, well, you're here." Michael forced a laugh, as though he'd heard an old local joke. Tara didn't laugh. She looked around, her gaze scanning the dim shops and houses. Curtains twitched in second-story windows. Someone was watching. "Maybe we should just ask for directions," Tara whispered. The man tilted his head toward the diner behind him. "Folks inside will be glad to help." Michael hesitated. He didn't want to go inside that diner. He didn't want to step further into this town that seemed stitched together from some forgotten year. But turning around and driving off without fuel or bearings didn't seem smart either. Inside, the diner buzzed faintly with yellow light. A jukebox in the corner hummed a low static, as if it had been left on too long. Booths lined the walls, their red vinyl cracked with age. People sat in them, ordinary looking at first glance. An elderly couple, a man in a mechanic's uniform, two teenagers sharing a milkshake. But the longer Michael looked, the stranger it felt. Their movements seemed off, like actors waiting for their cue. A waitress approached, her smile plastered wide and unmoving. "Table for two?" she asked, her voice chirpy mechanical. Tara nodded quickly. Michael slid into the booth, his back against the wall, so he could keep an eye on a room. The waitress handed them menus, thick, laminated pages that smelled faintly of mildew. Michael opened his, then froze. The menu wasn't filled with food. Each laminated page had a single phrase written in bold type. "Stay. Don't leave." He glanced at Tara's. It read the same. Tara shut hers quickly, pushing it aside. "What is this?" she whispered. The waitress leaned in, smile never faltering. "Would you like the special tonight?" Michael swallowed. "What's the special?" Her grin widened, though her eyes stayed dead. "You'll see." The sound of the jukebox shifted, the static swelling into something like a voice. Michael couldn't make out the words, only the rhythm. A chant. Tara grabbed his hand under the table. "We're leaving," she whispered. The door jingled as the man from outside walked in. The room seemed to straighten at his presence. He nodded at the couple, at the mechanic, at the teenagers, all of whom now stared at Michael and Tara with an unsettling stillness. "You're our guests," the man said, his voice carrying easily across the diner. "We don't often get new folks these days." Michael stood, pulling Tara up with him. "Thanks, but we gotta get going." The man's eyes hardened. "Going where?" Michael opened his mouth, but no sound came out. For a brief second, he realized he couldn't picture the highway anymore. He couldn't remember what road had led them here. Tara tugged at his arm. "Michael," she whispered urgently. And then, as if on cue, every light in the diner flickered. For a second, the room plunged into darkness. In that heartbeat, Michael swore he felt hands brushing against his back, whispers spilling right into his ear. When the lights returned, the booth across from them was empty. The teenagers were gone. Their milkshake glass sat on the table, still half full, two straws swaying slightly as if just disturbed. Michael's skin crawled. He didn't wait to see what came next. He pulled Tara toward the door. The man didn't move to stop them, but his voice followed, steady, echoing. "You can leave the diner, but you can't leave the town." The night air hit them like a slap when they burst out of the diner. Michael half expected the man or the waitress to chase after them, but the door shut quietly behind, sealing the glow and the hum inside. Out on the street, the town looked different. The neon signs they'd seen when they first arrived now pulsed with an unnatural rhythm, like slow, deliberate heartbeats. The gas station's flickering letters spelled no recognizable word anymore, just shifting symbols that made Tara's stomach churn. "Michael, this isn't right. We have to go," she said, her voice trembling. He nodded, fumbling with the car keys. They rushed back to their vehicle, but the moment Michael jammed the key into the ignition, a cold realization struck. The gas gauge read empty. Completely empty. "That's impossible," he muttered. "We had half a tank." Tara gripped the dashboard. They did something. Michael slammed the steering wheel, his breath coming fast. "Okay, Fine. We'll just walk. We'll get out of this place on foot." They started down the main street, the uneven pavement clicking under their shoes. Houses loomed on either side, their shutters closed tight. Yet they felt eyes, dozens of them, watching through cracks in curtains behind slats of wood. At the edge of town, the road stretched forward, vanishing into the tree line. Relief surged through Michael. "There. If we keep walking, we'll hit the highway." They hurried, the town falling behind. But after 15 minutes of steady walking, something was wrong. The buildings hadn't disappeared. The same diner sat across from the same gas station. The same tilted street lamp buzzed overhead. "We didn't turn around," Tara whispered. "We didn't." Michael's stomach dropped. They had walked straight and ended up exactly where they began. A soft creak echoed nearby. The door to one of the houses had opened. A figure stepped out, an old woman in a faded nightgown, her hair tangled, her face lost in shadow. "You can't leave," she said softly, Al. Her words rippled through the empty street. More doors creaked open. More figures emerged. Men, women, children, all pale-eyed, all moving with that same slow, deliberate rhythm. Michael grabbed Tara's hand. "Run!" They bolted down an alley, shoes slapping against broken cobblestones. Shadows stretched and bent unnaturally as the townsfolk followed. Not fast, but steady, always steady, like they had all the time in the world. The alley opened into a courtyard with a dry fountain at its center. Stone angels surrounded it, wings chipped and faces eroded, but their eyeless sockets seemed to follow. Tara doubled over, gasping. "We're trapped." Michael spun, searching for a way out, and saw it. A small, flickering sign above a door half sunken into the ground. Tavern. He didn't think. He yanked the door open and pulled Tara inside. The tavern smelled of damp earth and stale smoke. Wooden beams sagged overhead, and lanterns cast orange light that barely pushed back the dark. A bartender polished a glass that was already spotless. He looked up as they entered, his eyes as pale as the others. But unlike the rest, he smiled. Not the eerie mannequin smile from the diner, but something knowing, almost human. "You shouldn't be here," the bartender said. Michael swallowed hard. "We're trying to leave. Please, just tell us how." The bartender's smile faded. He set the glass down with a hollow clink. "There is no leaving. Not the way you think. This town holds on. Always has." Tara's voice cracked. "Why us?" The bartender shrugged. "Why anyone? You wandered off the road. You found it. Or maybe it found you." The lantern light flickered, shadows dancing across his face. For a moment, Michael thought he saw something else beneath the skin, like the bartender's features were just a mask stretched too thin. But the bartender added quietly, leaning in, "There are ways to last longer. To keep from fading." Michael's throat tightened. Fading into what? The bartender didn't answer. He just pointed to the glass in his hand. Inside, for the briefest second, Michael swore he saw his own reflection, but it wasn't him. It was pale, hollow-eyed, lips moving soundlessly, like a future already written. Michael pulled Tara deeper into the tavern, away from the bartender's strange smile. The air grew heavier the further they walked, every breath thick with smoke and damp wood. At the far end of the room, an old piano sat crooked, one leg shorter than the rest. A single note rang out as if plucked by unseen fingers, sharp and hollow. Tara clutched his arm. "We shouldn't be here." Michael knew she was right. But outside, pale-eyed strangers waited. Inside, at least, there was the faint illusion of choice. The bartender's voice drifted after them. "You'll see soon enough." "We all do." A back door swung open, creaking into a stairwell that led down into darkness. Michael hesitated, but Tara yanked him forward. Anything was better than standing still. The wooden steps groaned under their weight as they descended. At the bottom, the air turned colder, damp with the scent of stone and soil. The room opened into a cellar lined with shelves of bottles, most unmarked, filled with liquids of unnatural colors, green that glowed faintly, black that seemed to swallow light. Tara whispered, "This isn't wine." Before Michael could respond, movement stirred in the shadows. Something shuffled between the shelves, dragging nails or claws against the stone floor. The sound crawled up their spines. "Hello," Michael called, though he regretted it instantly. A figure lurched forward, and in the dim light of a hanging bulb, they saw him. A man, or what had once been a man. His skin was gray, stretched thin. His eyes were blank, the same pale white as the townsfolk, but his body was raw. Bent, twisted, joints swollen in unnatural directions. His lips parted, but no words came, only a wet hiss. Tara gasped and stumbled back. Michael grabbed her wrist, heart pounding, but the man didn't advance. Instead, he raised one shaking hand and pointed toward the shelves. Michael's eyes followed and froze. One bottle on the shelf wasn't dusty like the others. It was clean, the glass freshly polished, and inside was a murky liquid that seemed to pulse faintly. And floating in the middle of it was something disturbingly familiar. A face. His face. Michael staggered, his breath choking. Tara yanked him back. "Don't look at it." The twisted man hissed louder, clutching at his own chest as though begging them to understand. His fingers tore at his skin, and Michael saw faint etchings, lines carved into his flesh like maps, roads that spiraled in on themselves, leading nowhere. The bulb flickered, shadows swelling until they swallowed half the room. The man collapsed, bones cracking as his body bent further inward. When the light steadied, he was gone, as though he had melted into the stone floor. Only the faint outline of his map-like scars remained on the ground, glowing faintly before fading. Michael's voice was hoarse. What the hell was that? Tara was pale, her hands shaking. A warning. That's what it felt like. A deep vibration rolled through the cellar, shaking bottles on their shelves. Somewhere above, a door slammed. Voices murmured, low, steady, the same unison hum they had heard outside. Michael grabbed Tara's hand. We can't stay here. They bolted up the stairs, back through the tavern, only to find the main room empty. The bartender was gone. So was the glass. The lantern sputtered, casting long, trembling shadows. The front door had been replaced with a wall of stone. Panic surged through them. They spun, searching for another way, and saw it. The piano at the far end. The keys moved on their own, playing a slow, discordant melody. One note at a time. A rhythm that matched the pulse of the neon lights outside. The tune grew louder, faster. The air quivered with each note until it was all they could hear. Michael pressed his hands to his ears, but the sound wasn't coming from the piano anymore. It was inside his head. Taras pointing. The shadows along the walls were moving, stretching upward, forming figures. Dozens of them, pale eyes glowing faintly within the black. They reached out from the walls, their mouths opening in silent, endless screams. Michael grabbed Tara and pulled her toward the cellar door again, but it slammed shut on its own. The piano pounded faster, louder, until the keys blurred. And then silence. Every lantern extinguished at once. The room drowned in black. The darkness pressed against Michael and Tara like a living thing, heavy and suffocating. Michael's hands groped blindly until he found Tara's trembling fingers. He squeezed tight, grounding himself in that single human connection. Then, a faint glow appeared across the tavern, the outline of the front door, where there had been only stone. But it wasn't light seeping in from outside. It was something else, something pulsing. They staggered toward it, each step echoing too loudly in the silence. As they drew closer, the glow sharpened into symbols etched into the wood. The same spiraling roads carved into the twisted man's skin now burned across the door. Tara touched the markings, and they shifted under her palm like veins moving beneath skin. She gasped and jerked back, but the symbols didn't fade. Michael forced his voice steady. It's a way out. It has to be. He pressed his hand against the door. Cold fire raced up his arm, burning into his veins, his vision filling with roads twisting in impossible loops. For a moment, he wasn't in the tavern anymore. He was standing above the town, looking down. Streets curved into spirals, buildings aligned like pieces of a puzzle that didn't fit, the entire town forming a shape that wasn't meant for human eyes. He tore his hand away, panting, sweat cold on his skin. Tara's voice cracked. What did you see? Michael shook his head. Nothing we're supposed to understand. The glow dimmed, and the door creaked open a fraction. Beyond it was not the street, not the neon signs, not the pale-eyed townsfolk. It was a tunnel of darkness, stretching forward with no visible end. Tara's grip tightened on his arm. Michael, what if this isn't out? What if it's worse? He stared into the tunnel, the weight of her words pressing down. But behind them, the tavern groaned. The piano struck a single, violent chord, and the shadows along the walls began to peel free again. They were out of time. Together, he whispered. They stepped through. The tunnel swallowed them whole. The air was colder here, sharper, carrying whispers that weren't quite words. Their footsteps echoed endlessly, as though the ground itself were hollow. Time stretched, warped. Minutes could have been hours. Hours could have been seconds. Then at last, a faint glow ahead. A pinprick of light. Hope surged, and they ran, lungs burning, legs screaming. The whispers grew louder, forming half phrases that clawed at their sanity. You don't belong. You are chosen. You're lost." They burst into the glow, blinded for a moment, until their eyes adjusted. They were standing on asphalt, a normal road. Their car sat a few feet away, headlights dark, just where they'd left it. The forest loomed to either side, but there was no sign of the town. Tara laughed, a broken, disbelieving sound, as tears streaked her cheeks. "We made it. Oh God, we made it." Michael pulled her into a tight embrace, trembling with relief. "It's over. But then he froze. The road stretched behind them. Only it didn't. Where the tunnel had been, where trees should have been, the blackness still lingered. An endless void, pulsing faintly, like the symbols on the door. And from that void, dozens of pale eyes blinked open, watching. Michael turned Tara toward the car. "Don't look back. Just get in." They scrambled inside, doors slamming. The engine roared to life as if it had never been empty. Tires screeched, gravel spitting as Michael floored it. The headlights cut through the forest road, trees whipping past. Every nerve screamed for him to keep going, not to slow down, not to stop until miles lay between them and that place. But the longer they drove, the less familiar the road became. Turns they didn't remember, signs that pointed nowhere. And always, in the rearview mirror, a faint glow pulsing in the distance. Michael gripped the wheel so hard his knuckles whitened. Tara stared ahead, silent, her eyes wide. Finally, after what felt like hours, they spotted a green highway sign. Exit 14, Manhattan, 120 miles. Relief washed over them in an almost painful wave. Civilization. Safety. They sped past the sign, only to see another one a mile later. Exit 14, Manhattan, 120 miles. Michael's stomach dropped. His hands trembled on the wheel. Another mile. Another sign. Exit 14, Manhattan, 120 miles. Tara began to sob quietly. The road stretched on, endless, looping. And though the forest pressed close, Michael swore he could see, between the trees, faint glimmers of neon light. The diner, the gas station, the tavern, waiting. The town that wasn't on the map hadn't let them go. It never did. The house that called me back. I never wanted to go back. The house sat at the end of a narrow gravel road in upstate New York, sagging under the weight of decades. I hadn't seen it since I was 12 years old. My mother sold it after my father died, and I swore I'd never set foot near it again. But when a letter came, handwritten, no return address, just my name scrawled across the front, I felt that old chill crawl up my spine. Inside was one sentence. "It's time to come home. No signature. No explanation. Just that." For a week, I tried to ignore it, but something gnawed at me in my sleep. Dreams of long corridors and whispering walls. I'd wake drenched in sweat, the echo of my father's voice fading in my ears. He'd been gone for 30 years, but in the dream, he was calling me downstairs just like when I was a boy. So one Friday evening, against every ounce of good sense, I drove north. By the time I pulled onto the gravel drive, the sun had already dipped behind the trees. The house loomed in the dim light, its white paint now a sickly gray, shutters hanging by rusted hinges. But what froze me wasn't the decay. The windows glowed, every single one of them, not with warm lamplight, but with a faint, pale illumination like the afterimage when you stare too long at the sun. And though I knew the house had been empty for decades, I felt eyes on me from every room. My hands trembled as I cut the engine. The air was too still, too heavy. No crickets, no wind, just silence pressing in. I told myself I'd only look around, prove to myself it was nothing, and then leave. But deep down, I knew better. The house had already made its decision. The front steps groaned under my weight, just as they had when I was a kid sneaking in past curfew. The doorknob was cold as ice, though the night was warm. When I turned it, the door swung open without resistance. Inside, the air smelled faintly of mothballs and something sweeter, almost metallic. My stomach turned, and then came the voice. Soft, distant, but unmistakable. My father's voice. "Welcome home, son." My heart stopped. I staggered back, gripping the doorframe. But the house wasn't empty anymore. Lights flickered on in the hall, one after another, drawing me inside. Every rational thought screamed at me to leave. but my legs betrayed me. Step by step, I crossed the threshold. The door slammed shut behind me, and the house sighed. The hallway hadn't changed. The same faded wallpaper, the same creak beneath the 3rd floorboard, the same framed family photos that should have been gone decades ago. Except the photos weren't quite right. I paused in front of one. It was our family portrait. Me, my mother, and my father, taken when I was about 10. Only in this version, my father's eyes were open too wide, pupils blown black, and my mother's smile was stretched unnaturally, showing more teeth than she ever had. And me, my child self, stared straight at me, not at the camera. I reached out, trembling, and touched the glass. It was warm. Something whispered behind me. A hushed breath, words I couldn't make out. I spun around, but the hall was empty. Only the lights hummed faintly overhead, a sound I never remembered as a boy. I started forward, passing door after door. My old bedroom, the bathroom, the study my father locked every night. Each one closed tight, as if waiting. The whisper came again, closer this time. I forced myself to keep walking until I reached the living room, and froze. The furniture was arranged exactly as I remembered, down to the Afghan draped over the couch. Except everything looked fresher, colors brighter, wood polished, no dust, as if the years hadn't touched it. Then I noticed the clock on the mantel. The hands spun wildly, around and around, ticking louder with each turn. My chest tightened. That clock had stopped working the night my father died. I knew because I was the one who found it. The glass cracked, the hands frozen at 3:17 a.m. Now it ticked like a heartbeat. And with every tick, the air grew heavier, pressing against my lungs. "Sit down, son." The voice again, this time clear, from the armchair by the fire. But the chair was empty. I backed toward the stairs, panic clawing at my throat. My father's voice had always been commanding, but this wasn't memory. This was here now. The house groaned, a low, shuddering sound, as if its beams strained against some invisible weight. The lights flickered, then steadied. I thought about running, bolting for the door. But when I glanced back down the hallway, the door was gone. Just more wallpaper, more framed photos staring back at me. The house had sealed me in. I stumbled up the stairs, taking them 2 at a time, heart hammering. My old bedroom door stood ajar at the top, a soft glow seeping through the crack. I didn't want to go in, but my legs carried me anyway. Inside, the room was frozen in time. Posters of bands I'd loved as a kid, model cars lined on the shelf, my old desk littered with pencils and notebooks. I half expected to see my 12-year-old self sitting cross-legged on the bed. Instead, the bed was made. Perfectly. Too perfectly. On the pillow sat another envelope. The same handwriting as the first. My name. Hands shaking, I tore it open. Inside was a single sheet of paper. "You never should have left me." The words bled across the page as I read them, ink spreading like veins. I dropped it, stumbling back, and hit the closet door. It swung open, and inside, in the darkness, something shifted, something that breathed. The breath inside the closet was ragged, wet, like something inhaling through broken glass. I staggered back, but the closet's darkness seemed to stretch toward me, swallowing the soft glow of the room. My childhood toys looked warped in that spreading shadow, their plastic eyes glinting like they knew what was about to step out. The air turned cold, sharp enough to sting my lungs. And then, a hand slid out of the dark. Pale, thin, fingers too long, nails cracked and yellowed. It gripped the doorframe as if pulling itself closer to the light. I wanted to scream, but the sound caught in my throat. The hand withdrew. The breathing stopped. Silence. I forced myself forward, grabbed the closet door, and slammed it shut. The impact rattled the walls, shaking the bed frame. The glow in the room flickered once, then steadied again. My chest heaved. I turned, desperate to get out. But the door to the hallway was gone. Where it should have been was only wall, plaster smooth and seamless. My bedroom had become a box, sealed on all sides. The closet door creaked behind me. I spun, heart hammering. It was opening slowly, as if pushed by something patient. From within, a voice drifted out, soft and broken. "You left us, you left me." The same words as the note. I pressed back against the wall, trapped, as the closet darkness spread across the floor, swallowing the carpet. Then I saw movement in the corner of the room. The posters on the wall, my childhood heroes, were peeling away. Beneath the paper wasn't drywall, but something alive. A surface that pulsed faintly, like flesh. Veins stretched beneath it, dark and branching. I clawed at the wall, desperate for escape. My fingernails scraped against the surface, and it shivered, warm and damp beneath my touch. The closet door opened fully, and there, half shrouded in shadow, was a figure. It wore my father's clothes, plaid shirt, worn jeans, the belt I remembered him tightening every morning before work. But the thing's head wasn't right. Too long, skin sagging, eyes clouded over like milk. Its mouth opened, revealing rows of broken teeth. "Home," it rasped. "You came home." I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The walls pulsed around me like a heartbeat, and the figure stepped forward, dragging its bare feet across the carpet. I backed toward the window, but when I tore the curtains open, there was no outside. Just more house. Another hallway stretching endlessly into the dark. The figure lunged. I dove through the window. Instead of glass, my body broke through wallpaper. I tumbled onto the floor of another hallway, coughing, shaking, clawing at the carpet to pull myself upright. The house wasn't just trapping me. It was reshaping itself around me, building new spaces where none existed. Behind me, the wall sealed over. No window, no way back. And then I heard footsteps. Slow, heavy, coming down the hallway toward me. The footsteps echoed closer, deliberate, each one heavy enough to shake dust from the ceiling. I pressed against the wall, every nerve screaming to run, but there was nowhere to go but forward. The hallway stretched impossibly long, lined with doors that hadn't been there before. Each door looked identical, dark wood, brass knobs polished to a gleam, but I felt something behind them. Breathing, waiting. I picked one at random and yanked it open. Inside was the living room again. Same armchair, same fireplace, same clock ticking wildly on the mantel. Except this time, someone was sitting in the chair. My father, or something wearing his face. He smiled at me, but his lips didn't quite match the expression in his eyes. Those eyes were black, reflective, like wet stone. "Sit down, son." The same words from before, spoken calm, like he'd been expecting me. I shook my head and stepped back. The figure tilted its head, smile stretching wider. "You can't keep running. This is home. You belong here. With us." The word "us" sent a shiver through me. I slammed the door shut, but the voice bled through the wood, seeping into the hallway. "You left me. You left her. You thought you could forget. But the house remembers." I bolted down the hallway. The doors rattled as I passed, handles twisting on their own. Something inside scratched, clawed, begged to be let out. The corridor narrowed, the ceiling dipping lower, the walls inching closer until I had to duck, then crouch, then crawl on hands and knees. My palms pressed into carpet that felt damp, sticky, as if soaked in something long spilled. I pushed forward until the hallway spat me into another room. It was the kitchen, but not as I remembered. The counters gleamed with stainless steel, spotless, perfect. On the table sat 3 plates. Dinner was served, meat, potatoes, peas, steaming as though freshly made. And around the table sat my family. My father, my mother, and me. But not me as I was now. Me as a boy, 12 years old, smiling at the plate in front of him. I staggered back, ball rising in my throat. The younger version of myself lifted his head. His eyes locked onto mine, bright and innocent. "Come eat," he said. "We've been waiting." My mother's hand twitched, jerky, as she lifted her fork. Her arm moved like a marionette's, joints bending wrong. My father's head lolled to one side, the smile fixed, skin sagging. And the boy, that version of me, just kept smiling, even as blood began to drip from his mouth, thick and dark, staining the potatoes red. The clock on the wall ticked louder. Louder, louder. I screamed and ran, crashing through the table, plates shattering, food spilling across the floor like rot. My family didn't move. They only watched, their heads turning in unison as I fled into another doorway. The kitchen dissolved behind me, swallowed by the dark. Now I was in the study. My father's study, the one he always locked. And sitting on the desk was another envelope. I already knew what it would say, but I opened it anyway. "You never should have left me." This time, the ink didn't bleed. It writhed, letters shifting, twisting into new words. "Now you'll never leave again." The words on the page pulsed like a heartbeat. "Now you'll never leave again." I dropped the letter, but the ink clung to my fingers like tar. I scrubbed at my skin, but it only smeared, sinking deeper into my flesh, threading black veins up my wrist. The study door slammed behind me. The sound rattled the shelves, books spilling open across the floor. Their pages fluttered like wings, each one covered in the same scrawled message: "You belong here. You belong here. You belong here." I staggered back, my pulse hammering. The desk lamp flickered, then went out. The only light now came from the window, but outside wasn't night anymore. It wasn't morning either. The sky was a violent red, churning like boiling water, lightning splitting the clouds without thunder. And in the yard stood figures, dozens of them. Some were the faces of my family. Others were people I didn't know, neighbors long gone, forgotten relatives. All of them stared at the house, at me. The ink crawling under my skin burned. A voice filled the room, the same one I'd heard behind the locked door years ago. "You left me to rot. But houses don't die. They wait. And when you remember them, they remember you." The desk shuddered. The floorboards bulged upward, as if something massive pressed from beneath. I stumbled toward the window, desperate for escape. But the glass warped, stretching like liquid, and from its surface a hand pushed through. A hand with my own skin, my own fingernails. I screamed and swung a chair, shattering the glass. The hand dissolved into smoke, but beyond the broken frame wasn't the yard anymore. It was the front hallway. The house had folded in on itself, pulling me back to the beginning. The door was ahead, tall and black, just as it had been the night I first returned. Light poured through its edges, blinding and brilliant, promising escape. I ran. My lungs burned, my legs weak, but I forced myself forward. Behind me, the house roared, walls cracking, beams splitting, the voice chanting louder. "Never leave. Never leave. Never leave." I slammed into the door with all my weight. It swung open. Blinding daylight engulfed me. I stumbled out onto the dirt road, gasping, the cool air burning my lungs. The house loomed behind me, but it wasn't collapsing. It was watching. Windows like eyes, walls breathing in and out, patient. I ran down the road until my body gave out, until I collapsed on the gravel. When I woke, it was morning. The house was gone. All that remained was an empty lot, overgrown with weeds. No foundation, no rubble, nothing to prove it had ever existed. I thought I had escaped, until I reached into my pocket. The letter was still there. "Now you'll never leave again." And when I lifted my hand, the veins were still black. Echoes beneath the lake. The lake was quiet the night I returned. Too quiet. It stretched out like a sheet of glass under the moonlight, silver ripples brushing the shore. Most people would call it peaceful, but for me, silence meant the water was listening. I grew up here, in the kind of small town you only remember when someone mentions that place with the reservoir. What nobody says out loud is that there's another town beneath it, drowned, flooded decades ago when the dam was built. People displaced, houses torn down, or at least that's the official story. My grandfather used to tell me different. He said the town was never really gone, just hidden, waiting under the water like something holding its breath. I hadn't set foot here in over 12 years. After what happened with my cousin Mark, I swore I never would. But here I was, standing at the edge of the lake at midnight, the air damp and metallic, as if tasting blood. I should have turned back. The surface shimmered strangely that night. Not just reflections of the stars, but shapes moving beneath. Roads, windows, even a flicker of headlights as though cars were still driving streets that didn't exist anymore. I rubbed my eyes, convinced it was exhaustion. But when I looked again, I saw a house. 2 stories, white siding, black shutters, clear as if I could reach out and touch it through the water. My grandfather's house, the one that should have been demolished 30 years ago. I staggered back, my boots crunching gravel. Behind me, the town above ground slept, a handful of houses scattered along the ridge. But the water pulled at me, whispering. That was when the sound started. A faint ringing, almost like a bell underwater. At first it was distant, muffled, but then it grew sharper, louder, until it didn't sound like a bell anymore. It sounded like voices. Hundreds of them. They weren't speaking words, just tones, layered and overlapping. The sound vibrated in my chest, making it hard to breathe. My skin prickled as if a storm were rising, though the air was still. I forced myself away from the shoreline, heart hammering. That's when I saw her, a figure standing on the dock. Her dress fluttered as though caught in a wind I couldn't feel. She was pale, her hair stringy and wet, dripping in long strands that darkened the wood beneath her feet. Her face was turned away, but I already knew who it was. Rachel. She drowned here when we were 17. Everyone called it an accident. I knew better. Her head snapped toward me, eyes milky white, mouth opening wider than it should, wider than any human jaw should stretch. And from it poured the sound, the chorus of voices, a tidal wave of tones pressing against my skull. I stumbled back, clutching my ears, but it didn't help. The sound was inside me. The dock was empty when I looked again. Only the water remained, smooth and still. But the voices didn't stop. They whispered now, clear and deliberate. Come back. And though I didn't want to, though every part of me screamed to run, my feet carried me closer to the shore. I woke the next morning in the spare room of my aunt's house, though I didn't remember walking there. My clothes were damp, clinging coldly to my skin. My boots left dark stains on her carpet where water had seeped into the soles. But the worst part was the mud. It was smeared along my sleeves, caked under my nails, even streaked on my cheek as though I'd been crawling through the lake bed. I stumbled to the sink and splashed my face, watching the water spiral away. My reflection looked pale, haggard, older than I remembered. For a moment, I thought I saw someone else's face layered over mine. A gaunt, hollow-eyed man who blinked out when I leaned closer. I told myself it was stress. Just stress. But that whisper still lingered in my head. Come back. At breakfast, my aunt hardly looked at me. She stirred her tea without drinking it, eyes fixed on the window. When I asked if she'd heard anything last night, bells, voices, anything, she went stiff. No, she said. You should leave it alone. Leave what alone? She stood, pushing her chair back too sharply, and busied herself at the sink. That lake. The old stories. You remember what happened to Rachel. You don't need to stir it all up again. Her voice cracked on Rachel's name. I almost let it drop. But then I noticed her hands shaking as she gripped the counter, and the same thought returned. She knew something. Maybe always had. That night, against my better judgment, I went back to the water. The shoreline was shrouded in fog. It curled low, clinging to the ground, swallowing the familiar path. My flashlight cut only a thin cone through it, the beams scattering like dust in air. I wasn't alone. At first, I thought it was people fishing, shapes moving in the mist, low to the ground. But they didn't carry rods or lanterns. They crouched, dipping their hands into the shallows, scooping up water and pouring it over their faces again and again. I froze. There must have been at least a dozen of them, their silhouettes jerking unnaturally with each motion. One turned toward me. His face was drowned, bloated, gray, lips peeled back from teeth in a perpetual rictus. Water dribbled from his nose and ears as though he'd only just surfaced. His eyes, swollen and pale, locked on mine. The others followed. One by one, they raised their heads. I couldn't breathe. Their mouths opened in unison, expelling that same low chorus I'd heard the night before. A single, vibrating note that rattled the air. I stumbled backward. My light flickered and died, leaving me in a sea of fog. The sound grew louder, circling me. I spun, searching for a way out, but every direction looked the same. White mist, black water, shadows moving closer. Then, through the fog, I saw it. A lamppost, 50 feet from shore. Its light glowed faintly beneath the surface of the lake. And around it, brick roads stretched outward like veins, perfectly intact. The drowned town. It was there, glowing faintly under the water like a second world waiting to rise. I felt the pull again, the pressure in my chest urging me forward. My legs shook. My boots slid toward the shallows. Behind me, the chorus swelled. When I finally broke free and sprinted back up the hill, I didn't dare look behind me. Not once. But I swear I could still hear the splashing of feet, wet, dragging footsteps, following close behind. I didn't sleep that night. Every creak of the house, every gust of wind rattling the glass, I heard as footsteps dragging through water. My heart refused to calm, no matter how many times I told myself it was just exhaustion and nerves. By morning, I knew one thing. I needed answers. The local library sat at the edge of town, a squat brick building that looked half forgotten. Inside, the air smelled of dust and mildew, though a single overhead fan ticked lazily, stirring nothing. The librarian, a woman in her 60s, barely looked up when I walked in. I asked her if there were old records of the town before the dam was built, maybe photographs or maps. She gave me a sharp look, then said nothing. Instead, she pointed me toward a locked cabinet at the back. "I shouldn't let you in there," she muttered, fumbling with a key. "But if you've seen it, if you've heard them, then maybe it's already too late." The words chilled me. If you've heard them. Inside the cabinet were stacks of yellowing newspapers, brittle ledgers, and a leather-bound diary so cracked its spine crumbled when I opened it. The first article I found was dated 1954. Entire town to be flooded for new dam project. The headline promised prosperity, jobs, a brighter future. But the articles that followed told a different story. Resistance from locals, protests ignored, families forced out. And then the disappearances. At least a dozen townsfolk who refused to leave were never seen again. No records of where they went. No graves, no explanations. Just gone. The diary told the rest. It belonged to a pastor, the last minister of the town's church. His entries began with desperation, pleas to the state to spare their homes. But soon they turned bitter, fearful. He wrote about dreams of bells ringing underwater, of voices calling to him in the night. He described townsfolk wandering toward the lake as if sleepwalking, vanishing into the dark. His final entry, scrawled in shaky hand, read, "They are not gone. They are waiting below. When the water is still, you can hear the choir. The Lord has abandoned this place. Only the lake remembers us now." I shut the diary, hands trembling. Outside, the afternoon sun glared too brightly, as if mocking the gloom I carried. My aunt was waiting in her car. Somehow, she knew where I'd gone. "You've read enough," she said, her voice flat. "Stop digging, or you'll end up like the rest." I asked her what she meant, but she wouldn't answer. She only gripped the steering wheel until her knuckles blanched, whispering something so softly I barely caught it. They don't forgive. That night, the dreams returned. I was walking through a street I'd never seen, but I knew it belonged to the drowned town. Stone storefronts lined the road, their windows dark. Street lamps glowed dimly, swaying though no wind blew. And somewhere ahead, faint music played, an organ's low rumble, echoing through the water. I followed it, unable to stop. My feet splashed in puddles though no rain had fallen. The deeper I went, the louder the music grew, until it was all I could hear. Then I saw her. Rachel. She stood in the middle of the street, dripping wet, hair plastered to her face. Her eyes locked on mine, and in that moment I knew she hadn't drowned. She hadn't disappeared. She had joined them. Her lips parted, releasing that same chorus, the endless note that wasn't quite human. It shook the buildings, cracked the windows, made the ground tremble beneath me. I woke choking on water, coughing up lake weed that clung to my throat. My bedsheets were soaked through, and outside, from somewhere in the fog beyond the hills, I heard the tolling of bells. I tried to convince myself I was losing my mind. Nightmares, stress, leftover grief about Rachel. That had to explain it. But the water stains on my sheets, the weeds in my throat, the mud beneath my fingernails told another story. I needed to see the town again. Not in dreams, but with my own eyes. That evening, I returned to the lake. The fog had thickened, clinging to the trees like smoke. The shoreline was deserted, but I didn't trust the silence. I kept expecting to hear that low chorus rising from the water. Instead, I heard a splash. I froze, shining my flashlight across the surface. Ripples spread outward, but there was no stone, no fish. Just the faint shimmer of something pale moving beneath the surface. I knew what I had to do. The old boat launch was still there, half buried in reeds. I dragged a rotting rowboat into the water and pushed off, each stroke creaking as though the wood would snap beneath me. The further I rowed, the more the world seemed to dissolve, the fog swallowing the shoreline, the stars fading overhead. And then I saw it. The town lay beneath me, clearer than ever before. Brick streets, crumbling rooftops, lampposts still burning faintly under the surface. It wasn't ruins, it was waiting, preserved. As the boat drifted, I heard bells. Low, solemn, tolling from nowhere and everywhere at once. The water quivered with the sound, vibrating against the hull. Then the faces appeared. Dozens, maybe hundreds, rising just beneath the surface. Men, women, even children, all staring up at me with pale, swollen eyes. Their mouths opened, expelling bubbles that carried that endless note upward. My boat rocked with the force of it. And then I saw Rachel again. She floated directly beneath the boat, her hair fanning like seaweed. Her eyes fixed on mine with unnatural calm. Slowly, she raised her hand, pressing her palm flat against the underside of the water as if reaching for me. My chest clenched. I whispered her name before I could stop myself. That was a mistake. The water erupted. Hands burst upward, clawing at the boat, grasping my wrists, my shirt, my throat. Cold and slimy, their grip was impossibly strong. The boat tilted violently, nearly capsizing. I screamed and tore free, slamming the oars against the hands until they slipped back into the dark. My body shook with adrenaline, but I kept rowing, faster and faster, until the fog thinned and the faint glow of my aunt's house broke through the trees. When I stumbled inside, drenched and shaking, she was waiting for me. Not surprised, not angry, just sad. "You've seen them," she said quietly. I couldn't even answer. My voice shook too badly. She poured me tea, though my hands were too unsteady to hold the cup. Finally, she sat across from me, folding her hands as though bracing herself. "Our family stayed behind," she said, "when the dam was built. We thought we could outlast the flood, but the water came faster than anyone expected. Rachel, she wasn't the first, and she won't be the last." Her voice broke. "They're still there, beneath the lake. Not alive, not dead. They call to the ones who belong to them." I felt sick. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because once you hear the call," she whispered, "it never stops." And as if to prove her right, the bells tolled again, distant, muffled, but unmistakable. This time, I wasn't sure if they came from the lake or from inside my own skull. Sleep was impossible. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Rachel's face pressed against the water. I heard the bells echoing through my skull. I felt the icy hands clutching my throat. By dawn, I made a decision. I would leave, sell the house, drive until the lake was nothing more than a rumor in my rearview mirror. But when I stepped outside, my car wouldn't start. Not a cough, not a flicker. The engine was bone dead. That's when I noticed the mud. Thick, wet streaks smeared across the hood and windshield, dripping down like something had crawled out of the lake during the night and touched everything I owned. I staggered back, ball rising in my throat. Inside, my aunt stood by the window, watching me with eyes that seemed far too calm. "You can't leave," she said softly. "None of us can." I snapped. Rage and terror twisted together in me. "You knew. You let me stay here. You let me go out there. You let me." My voice cracked, the words collapsing into raw panic. Her gaze softened with pity. "It's not about letting. It's about belonging. The lake remembers. And once it calls your name, you'll always come back." That was when the sound started again. Not bells this time, but voices. A layered chorus, hundreds deep, calling my name. Whispering it from the trees, the water, the very air. My skin broke out in goose flesh. I ran. Through the fog, down the dirt road, across the frozen ground that seemed to pulse beneath my feet. My lungs burned, my vision blurred, but I couldn't stop. The voices followed, echoing my name with every step. When I reached the shoreline, the lake was waiting. Perfectly still, perfectly dark, a mirror stretched to infinity. And standing on the surface of that impossible reflection was Rachel. Not drowning this time, not reaching from below. She stood upright, barefoot, hair drifting in an invisible current, her eyes fixed on me with a sadness that hollowed me out. Her lips moved, forming words I couldn't hear. Then the surface rippled. Figures rose around her, dozens of them, standing tall on the water's skin as though it were solid ground. Their faces pale, their bodies draped in lake-weed, their eyes fixed on me. The drowned town had gathered. Rachel raised her hand, and the others mirrored her. The lake trembled, waves rolling outward as though it wanted to pull me in. My knees buckled. I should have run. I should have turned away. But instead, I stepped forward. One foot, then another, until the icy water closed over my boots. The chill shot up my legs, into my chest, into my skull. But the voices grew warmer, softer, surrounding me like a lullaby. Rachel smiled faintly, and for the first time since her death, I believed she was real again. Waiting for me, wanting me. My aunt's warning echoed dimly in my mind. Once you hear the call, it never stops. I thought of escape, of fighting back, of clawing my way out. But the water rose higher, wrapping around me like an embrace. The last thing I saw was Rachel's hand, reaching for mine. And the last thing I heard was the toll of the bells, steady, solemn, eternal, as the lake swallowed me whole. Somewhere deep below, a town welcomed me home.